is up, guys, and welcome to this week's episode of XP and the Rookie. I'm XP.
And I'm the Rookie.
We are brought to you today by our sponsor, Dazoo Games, located in Easley, South Carolina. Check them out online at dazoogames.com. And Thursday nights are Commander nights, so come on Thursdays and get a game in with us. All right, and Rookie, today we are talking about one of my other favorite decks.
Yes.
A very important deck to me. It is my Nekusar deck, which I have aptly named the Legion of Doom Group Hug. So basically, a little bit of backstory on that name. So as you may know, a deck that is mainly Planeswalkers as a win condition is called a Super Friends deck. Yes. Because, you know, they're like the superheroes of the or the Magic universe. And so I aptly named mine Legion of Doom because Nekusar is Grixis, which is black, blue, and red. He's sort of a evil kind of character. Those are usually the nemesis colors, like the bad guys are usually in Grixis. So
my favorite colors.
Yeah. So Legion of Doom, and then Group Hug because it helps everybody draw more cards.
It does.
Yeah.
But it's got a little sneaky.
Got a little bit of a twist. So we'll start off by reading off Nekusar. So Nekusar, the Mindrazer, is 2 blue, red, and black. For a legendary creature, zombie wizard. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar the Mindrazer deals 1 damage to that player. So basically, he lets you draw an additional card. He lets everybody draw more cards. But every time an opponent draws, he will deal 1 damage to him. And that's sort of the theme of the deck. So there's a lot of other cards in the deck that makes people take damage from drawing cards. Right. Because you're drawing more cards, you're eventually going to have to discard those cards. Yes. So there's also some cards in there that makes people take damage whenever you discard cards. Right. So there's a lot of that, and basically what it's trying to do is make all of your friends draw more cards and slowly turn them into enemies. Then next thing is use Planeswalkers as cannon fodder while I keep my life total safe. So essentially having these Planeswalkers out to draw the ire of my opponents, so that way they're focusing more on them to take them out. And then lastly is spinning that wheel. So what a wheel is it's a card that is based around the original wheel, which is Wheel of Fortune, which is 2 and a red for a sorcery that says each player discards their hand, then draws 7 new cards. So essentially it's the idea of pitching your hand to the graveyard and drawing more. So this deck runs 6 different wheels in it. I'm pretty sure that's almost all the wheels in Magic. And then it just has a lot of other cards that force people to draw into more things. But its key pieces are going to be basically any permanent card that says the words each opponent and draws a card. Yes. Because the idea of this deck is to force everybody to draw cards and draw them passively. Like, that's the most important thing. There's a couple instants and sorceries, like the wheels, and some other ones that will one time make people draw a couple cards, draw multiple cards. But the idea is to have permanents such as Howling Mine, Fonts of Mythos, these cards that make them draw an additional card on their draw phase every single turn. Right. Just keeping it moving. The next thing is having lots of permanents. So lots of artifacts, planeswalkers, enchantments, some creatures, but most of them are going to be tokens. Right. Just to make people's eyes continually be looking at other things while you just basically muddy the board to make it, like, the threat assessment just that much harder. Exactly. And then the last thing is things that damage for both discarding and drawing cards, like I was saying earlier. So basically things that read that second line of text that Nekusar has, where whenever a player draws a card, it deals X amount of damage to them. Also, whenever they discard a card, dealing that much damage to them. And honestly, in this deck, there's not really any combos. I believe there are some that can be done. It's just in this deck, I wasn't really going for that. However, there's a lot of synergy in the deck with drawing cards, dealing damage, lots of artifact-based ramp to be able to get Nekusar out there real quick. And so we're just going to move into the next segment, which we're going to turn over to Rookie. Now, Rookie, you've actually played this deck a few times, and you seem to really enjoy it. So what's kind of your thoughts on the deck?
So the best part about this deck is before you get to be able to cast Nekusar, which was really cool. Something that he didn't really mention about this deck is it actually has a decent amount of ramp in this deck.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, if you're not watching, my control players out there, if you're not watching whoever is playing this Nekusar deck, they will have an insane amount of mana just in 2 or 3 turns. Especially with all the signets that are in it. There's a Soul Ring obviously in it, and so the ramp in this deck is actually pretty insane if you're not careful. But I like how in the beginning it's a bit of a covert deck, because in the beginning, before you get Nekusar out there, you're playing like, hey, you can draw more cards. Yeah, I mean, like, why not? Let's draw more cards. And then eventually, you just bring Nekusar out, and then someone goes to draw, and they're taking 8 life because they're drawing 4 cards.
Yep.
Or I'll go ahead and tell this quick story about when I was playing it. It came down to me and another one of our friends.
Oh gosh.
And so I don't remember the specifics of all the exact combat triggers and things like that, but he went to attack me with first strike. I believe it was, right? Or was it double strike?
So basically, our friend was playing dragons.
Yes.
He had a card called Dragon Mage, which is essentially a wheel on a stick, because whenever Dragon Mage deals damage to a player, each player discards their hand and draws 7 new cards.
Right.
So it's essentially Wheel of Fate on a creature. So basically what happened is he gave all of his creatures double strike. They were both at very low life totals.
Yes,
so
extremely low.
the damage coming at Rookie here would have killed him with the double strike.
Yes.
But Rookie had Nekusar, as well as something that deals damage on discard.
Yes.
So with how Double Strike works, there's essentially 2 separate damage steps. So anything that triggers on damage will happen each time. So when the Dragon player hit with the initial Double Strike damage, that forced each of them to wheel. So he discarded his hand of, I believe, 7, drew 7, took 21, I think.
It was 21.
And that was enough to kill him on just the double strike damage alone.
Yes.
So Rookie was able to survive and eliminate a player. So that's another important thing. Make sure you understand how that works.
Yes.
But honestly, it was very recently that I learned exactly how double strike and first strike work, and making that second iteration of the combat damage step. So just keep an eye out for those sort of things. But that was a very interesting sort of happenstance that happened. It sort of saved him, and that sort of thing.
Right. But the point I make with that is that with this deck, your goal, and this is how I always play it, really you don't have to have Nekusar out there super early. It's okay to wait to get Nekusar out there, because you want to kind of divert attention from yourself for a little bit. You want to start throwing up some artifacts and some enchantments. There's I believe it's called Spellbook in this deck, correct? That's
that's the 0 mana skip your discard phase.
Super useful because as you're drawing, you don't have to discard. So keep that in mind as well. But you can stay covert, kind of throw out a few artifacts, some enchantments, Dictative Crew fixes in this deck, which is super useful. And then just out of nowhere, you can bam throw Nekusar out there, and now everyone who has to draw, like, let's say 4 cards every time they go to their draw step, now they're taking 8 damage if all you have is Nekusar out there. But there are other pieces in this deck that allow you to add on to that damage. So sometimes people could be drawing 4 and taking 16 or whatever it is.
It gets out of hand very quickly.
It can. Yes.
One of probably the most fun / least fun is a card called Teferi's Puzzle Box.
Oh yes.
So it's a little bit of like a confusing worded card, but essentially it reads, it's 4 mana for an artifact. During each player's draw phase, that player counts the cards in his or her hand, puts those cards on the bottom of his or her library, then draws that number of cards. So because of how it's all worded, at the beginning of their draw phase, they're going to draw a card. And then if you have anything that makes them draw more, they're going to draw those additional cards. Then they're going to count their hand, put that underneath, then draw that many. So it's very easy to make someone draw like 11 or 12 cards a turn.
And that's just with Nekusar, that's like 22 damage.
Yeah, it's a lot of damage. Nekusar is doing 1 for every card drawn. You're going to have things like Ob Nixilis, the new one, that's dealing damage every time. Then there's what's the other one? Underworld Dreams is another one.
Yes.
That causes them to deal damage on card draw and that sort of thing. But next, we're going to talk about something a little bit more sensitive.
Oof.
So this deck is a deck that was my brother's. It has been since passed down to me. He put a lot of time and money into it.
And so did you.
And yeah, I put a lot of trade credit into it. I traded for a lot. I didn't put a lot of like cash money into this. This deck price is $683.32.
Good God.
It runs 4 or 5 fetch lands. Those are generally around $20, but it does run a couple of the pricier ones. One of which is Scalding Tarn, which is around $100 currently. It runs the 3 shocks that it can do. That's about $30. And then it only runs about 17 basics.
But
so some of the basics are revised. They're unlimited. They're older lands that tend to be around anywhere between 75 cents to $1.50, which when you think about it, like, oh, that's not that much. But when you have 17 of them, that's another nearly $20 just in lands. Not to mention Wheel of Fortune is not a cheap card.
Not at all.
And this deck runs the revised version, which is right around $100.
Even more not cheap.
Yeah. It's this deck is very pricey. It's very effective,
Yes.
mainly because of that price. So one thing that the guys at the Command Zone talk about a lot, just dealing with budget, is that a player can spend as much money as they want on a deck.
Right.
Will that deck be powerful? Yes. Now, one thing that you can do to combat against that is spending time researching.
Right.
So finding other cards that do the same thing as these $100, $50, $20, even like $10 cards that are just a few cents, you'll find yourself into a place where you are competing with them just based on that.
Right.
Which I think is just really cool. And obviously there's sometimes that I do that and sometimes that I don't. It just really depends on what I have available to me.
Right. Always check your collection first. If you even have a collection,
always
check it first and see what you've got first. And then after that, you can move on to seeing what you need to pick up.
Yeah, because nothing's worse than trading some cards in and getting a card that's like $20
that you realize
just to realize that you had 2 copies of it already.
Yeah.
That happened to me, and that made me very upset. So just pay attention to that. But hopefully, if you do that, it's a card that can be used elsewhere.
Exactly.
Mine was not.
But yeah, I mean, 100% with this Nekusar deck. The whole premise of the deck, just what it does, very simple. To actually, it's just make people draw cards. That's your goal. That's your only goal with this deck, is to make people draw cards. And the thing is, guys, you can find a lot of different pieces and a lot of different cards for you to be able to use that.
Exactly.
There's not one card that makes you do that. There's cards throughout the entire history of Magic that are 5 cents that say each player draws a card or something along those lines. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and just looking at these wheels, I priced them up. 4 out of the 6 wheels are less than $20, and most of them are less than 10.
Right.
They've seen lots of prints and everything. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. Like when you see deck lists online that are, $300, $400, I guarantee you it's, first of all, it's probably just because of lands.
Yeah, lands are some of the most expensive things in Magic.
Right, yeah. Like I said, the fetch lands that a lot of people will put into their decks just to help kind of fix their mana, those are all quite expensive. They don't get printed very much. They've only been printed like 2 to 3 times.
Right.
They need to be reprinted, but that's another topic for another video.
Wizards, they need to be reprinted.
But yeah, so just spend time. Like, if you want to build Nekusar, go for it.
Yes.
The base version Nekusar, he's less than $5. And you can find cards for it that are reasonably cheap. Just find cards that make people draw cards. And just like, honestly, Grixis is just great colors for a bunch of different strategies. Yes. So while you're looking, be sure to check out Zoo Games to see if you can find any of those pieces there. Also, remember, Thursdays are our Commander Night, and you may actually be able to get to see Nekusar in action.
Yes.
So we hope to see you there, guys, and most of all, we hope to see you in the next episode.